My father stood at the head of the table, champagne glass raised high, and said the words that would destroy our family. To my successful son, the future of this family. As for her, well, she tried. The room erupted in laughter. I just raised my glass and smiled. What they didn't know was that I'd already made my move. Let me back up. I'm Thora Blackwood, 28 years old, the family disappointment who chose paintbrushes over legal briefs. My father Vernon built a $40 million real estate empire and expected his children to be extensions of his ambition. My brother Garrison delivered. Harvard undergraduate, Wharton MBA, and Vernon's shadow since the day he could walk. Me? I opened an art gallery in a converted warehouse downtown, which Vernon called my expensive hobby to anyone who would listen. My mother, Winona, sat beside me that night, her hands folded perfectly in her lap, her smile never wavering, even as Vernon's words cut through the air like a blade. She'd perfected that smile over 40 years of marriage. The one that said everything was fine while her husband diminished her at every opportunity. Behind every great man, Vernon would say at these parties, is a woman who knows when to be quiet. And Winona would smile that same smile while 200 guests laughed at her expense. But here's what Vernon never understood about quiet people. We're not weak, we're observing, we're documenting. We're waiting for the perfect moment to reveal what we've learned in all those years of silence. And that night, at his 62nd birthday party, surrounded by business partners and country club friends who worshipped his success, Vernon gave us that moment. The toast wasn't just cruel. It was his confession that he'd never seen me or my mother as anything more than props in his success story. Garrison laughed the loudest, his Rolex catching the light as he clapped. My Uncle Morris wiped tears from his eyes. Even Vernon's secretary giggled behind her manicured hand. I kept smiling as I sipped my champagne. Because 3 days earlier, I'd sat in a law office with my mother and learned about the documents she'd been collecting for 15 years. The bribes, the forged reports, the tax evasion that would destroy everything Vernon had built if it ever came to light. We weren't there to destroy him. We were there to restructure the family business, and Vernon had just given us the perfect reason. So when I raised my glass to toast the man who'd just humiliated me in front of 200 people, I wasn't surrendering. I was saying goodbye to the old Vernon Blackwood, the one who thought cruelty was power. He just didn't know it yet. Growing up in the Blackwood family meant everything was a competition. Who got the best grades? Who closed the biggest deal? Who could make Vernon proud enough to actually say it out loud? My father built his real estate empire from a single rental property in Queens to a portfolio worth $40 million, and he never let anyone forget that success was the only currency that mattered in our house. Winners and losers, Vernon would say over breakfast, pointing his fork at Garrison and me. The world divides into winners and losers, and Blackwoods are always winners. Garrison absorbed these lessons like scripture. By 14, he was reading the Wall Street Journal at breakfast. By 18, he was interning at Vernon's company, shadowing our father through negotiations and property tours. When he got into Harvard, Vernon threw a party that lasted 3 days. When he graduated from Wharton with his MBA, Vernon named a building after him. The Garrison Blackwood Tower stood 40 stories tall in downtown, a monument to everything my brother had become. That boy has my blood running through his veins, Vernon would tell anyone who'd listen. Pure Blackwood ambition. Then there was me, Thora, the daughter who colored outside the lines, literally and figuratively. While Garrison studied market trends, I studied Monet. While he negotiated his first $1 million deal, I was negotiating with local artists to display their work in my gallery. The day I turned down law school to pursue art full-time, Vernon didn't speak to me for 3 months. When he finally did, it was to introduce me at a charity gala as my daughter who's still finding herself, with that particular laugh that made everyone uncomfortable but too polite to show it. My gallery occupied a converted warehouse in the Arts District, a space I'd renovated with my own savings, and a small inheritance from my grandmother, the only person who'd ever told Vernon to shut up and actually made him do it. I named it after her, the Estelle Gallery. We showcased emerging artists, hosted community workshops, and actually turned a profit in our second year. Not that Vernon cared about profits that didn't have at least 7 figures. "When are you going to get serious about life?" he'd ask during family dinners. "Garrison's already managing 3 properties. What are you managing?" "Finger paintings." "They're contemporary installations, Dad," I'd correct him, though I knew it was pointless. "Call them whatever you want." They don't pay dividends. My mother, Winona, would always intervene at these moments, her voice soft but firm. "Vernon, please." "Not tonight," and Vernon would wave his hand dismissively. "I'm just trying to motivate her, Winona." Someone has to. These dinners happened every Sunday at the family estate in Westchester, a sprawling mansion that Vernon had bought to prove he'd made it. The dining room could seat 30, though it was usually just the 4 of us, spread out across a table that felt more like a boardroom. Garrison would talk about acquisitions and profit margins. Vernon would nod approvingly. I would talk about our latest exhibition or community program. Vernon would check his phone. Winona would sit between us all, the perpetual peacemaker, smoothing over hurt feelings with gentle touches and redirected conversations. She'd been beautiful once before 40 years of being Mrs. Vernon Blackwood had worn her down to someone who spoke in whispers and apologies. She wore designer clothes that Vernon picked out, attended charity lunches with women who pitied her, and never, ever contradicted her husband in public. "You know your father loves you," she'd tell me while we cleared dishes, the only time Vernon allowed us to dismiss the staff. "He just doesn't know how to show it." "He shows it to Garrison just fine," I'd reply. "Garrison is easier for him to understand. You're like me, Thora. We see the world differently." But even Winona didn't know how differently I'd learned to see things. While Vernon dismissed me as a dreamer, I was watching, learning, understanding that in the Blackwood family, power wasn't given, it was taken. And sometimes, the best time to take it was when everyone thought you were too weak to try. The week before Vernon's birthday party, I'd actually felt optimistic. The gallery had just landed a major grant. The Times had featured us in their art section. I thought maybe, just maybe, Vernon would finally see that success came in different forms. I should have known better. Vernon Blackwood only recognized one form of success, and it looked exactly like him, just 30 years younger, and named Garrison. Vernon's 62nd birthday party was held at the Avalon Country Club, the kind of place where membership cost more than most people's houses. Garrison had organized everything with military precision. 200 guests, a 7-course meal prepared by a Michelin-starred chef, and enough champagne to float a yacht. The ballroom glittered with crystal chandeliers and gold accents, every detail screaming success. I arrived alone. My date, a sculptor named James, had canceled that morning with a text. "Sorry, can't handle another night of your father treating me like the help." I couldn't blame him. The last time Vernon met James, he'd spent the entire evening asking if sculpting was his hobby or his actual job, with that smirk that made people feel 2 inches tall. "Where's your little artist friend?" Vernon asked, the moment I walked in, loud enough for the partners from his firm to hear. "He couldn't make it," I said simply. "Couldn't even get someone to pretend to love you for one night?" Vernon laughed, turning to Uncle Morris. "At least when Garrison brings someone, they stick around long enough to meet the family." Garrison appeared then with his fiancée, Portia, a corporate lawyer who looked like she'd been ordered from a catalog titled Perfect Daughter-in-Law. She air-kissed me with the warmth of an ice sculpture. "Thora, how nice. Still playing with your little art gallery?" she asked. "Still winning cases by boring the opposition to death?" I replied sweetly. Garrison steered her away before she could respond, muttering something about me being sensitive. That was his favorite word for me, sensitive. Like feeling things was a character flaw in the Blackwood family. The dinner began with Vernon holding court at the head table, regaling everyone with the story of his first real estate deal. I'd heard it 1,000 times. The rundown building in Queens, the renovation nobody thought would work, the sale that launched an empire. Each time he told it, the profit margins got bigger, and his struggles got more dramatic. "Self-made," he kept saying, pounding the table for emphasis. "Everything you see here I built with these 2 hands and this brain." My mother sat beside him, nodding at all the right moments, laughing at all the practiced jokes. She wore a black designer dress he'd chosen, her diamonds catching the light every time she moved. To everyone else, she looked like the perfect wife of a successful man. To me, she looked like someone who disappeared into someone else's story. The speeches started after the main course. Business partners praised Vernon's vision and ruthlessness, which they called determination. Golf buddies roasted his terrible swing and his refusal to lose gracefully. The mayor himself sent a video message congratulating Vernon on his contributions to the city's development, conveniently ignoring the 3 low-income neighborhoods Vernon had gentrified out of existence. Then came the family toasts. Garrison went first, standing with the confidence of someone who'd never been told he wasn't enough. "My father taught me that success isn't given, it's taken," he said, raising his glass. "He taught me that Blackwood men don't accept second place. We don't make excuses. We make empires." The room erupted in applause. Vernon actually wiped away what might have been a tear. My mother spoke next, her voice soft but clear. 40 years ago, I married a man with nothing but ambition. Today, I sit beside a man who conquered the world. Vernon, you've given us a life beyond my wildest dreams." She raised her glass delicately. "To 40 more years." The applause was polite but warm. Vernon kissed her cheek for the cameras, already looking past her to see who would speak next. Then Vernon himself stood up. "Before we continue," he began, tapping his champagne glass for silence, "I want to make my own toast." The room quieted immediately. Vernon Blackwood commanding attention was like gravity, inevitable and inescapable. "I look around this room and see my legacy. The buildings that will stand long after I'm gone. The business that will carry the Blackwood name into the future." He raised his glass toward Garrison. "To my successful son, the future of this family. The one who understood that Blackwood blood means something. The one who makes me proud every single day." Then his eyes found me. The pause was deliberate, theatrical. "As for her," he said, his voice carrying that special tone of amused disappointment, "well, she tried." The laughter was immediate and cruel. Garrison smirked into his champagne. Uncle Morris actually slapped his knee. Vernon's business partners chuckled with the casual cruelty of people who'd never been the punchline. Even the waitstaff seemed to shrink back, embarrassed for me. I raised my glass, smiled, and drank. Inside, something finally snapped into place. Not anger, not hurt, clarity. Perfect crystal clarity about what needed to happen next. 3 days after the party, I sat in the offices of Maxwell Drummond, the most feared estate attorney in New York. His firm occupied the entire 40th floor of a building my father had tried to buy 3 times and failed. That wasn't a coincidence. I'd chosen Drummond specifically because he was one of the few people in the city Vernon couldn't intimidate, buy, or charm. "Miss Blackwood," Drummond said, adjusting his wire-rimmed glasses. "When you called, you mentioned this was about your mother's interests. Is Mrs. Blackwood joining us?" "She'll be here in 10 minutes, I said. "But first, I need to know something. If a spouse has documentation of financial crimes committed during a marriage, what are her options?" Drummond's expression didn't change, but his fingers stilled on his pen. That would depend on the nature of the documentation and the crimes in question. The elevator chimed, and my mother walked in. But this wasn't the Winona from the birthday party. She wore a simple gray suit I'd never seen before, her hair pulled back severely, her wedding rings notably absent. She carried a leather briefcase that looked both new and purposeful. "Mr. Drummond," she said, her voice steady and clear. "Thank you for seeing us." She sat down and placed the briefcase on his desk, spinning the combination locks with practiced ease. Inside were 15 years of meticulously organized files, photographs, and USB drives. "Your father thinks I'm weak because I'm quiet," she said to me, though her eyes stayed on Drummond. "But quiet people hear everything. We see everything. And sometimes we document everything." Drummond pulled on white cotton gloves before handling the first file. As he read, his eyebrows climbed steadily higher. The Riverside Development bribes to city planning commissioners, the forged environmental reports for the Grandview Towers that covered up soil contamination, the offshore accounts in the Caymans hiding $12 million in taxable income, construction contracts with mob-connected unions, safety violations covered up with cash payments to inspectors. "Mrs. Blackwood," Drummond said slowly, "this is extensive. How long have you been collecting this?" Since Thora was 13, Winona replied, the day Vernon told her that women in the Blackwood family were meant to be seen and not heard. I realized then that if I was going to be silent, I'd better be listening. I stared at my mother, seeing her clearly for the first time. This wasn't the broken woman who apologized for Vernon's cruelty. This was someone who'd been playing a longer game than any of us realized. Why now? I asked her. Why not divorce him years ago? Because I was waiting, she said simply. Waiting for you and Garrison to be old enough to handle the truth, waiting for Vernon to go too far. And at that party, in front of 200 witnesses, he finally did. She turned to Drummond. I don't want to destroy him. Despite everything, he's the father of my children. But I want control of the company, and I want both my children to inherit equally. Drummond reviewed the documents for another hour, occasionally asking Winona how she'd obtained certain pieces of information. Each answer revealed another layer of her intelligence. She'd taken accounting courses online, learned to read financial statements through YouTube videos, befriended Vernon's secretary by remembering her birthday every year, earning loyalty that gave her access to files Vernon thought were secure. This is more than enough, Drummond finally said. With this evidence, Vernon has two choices: sign over majority control of the company to you, or face federal charges that would result in significant prison time and the complete loss of his empire. What about Garrison? I asked. He's been Vernon's right hand for years. Is he implicated in any of this? Winona shook her head. Your brother is many things, but he's not a criminal. Vernon kept him clean, probably planning to hand over everything once the statute of limitations ran out on the worst of it. Drummond drew up the papers that afternoon. The transfer would be clean, legal, and immediate. Vernon would retain his title as CEO, but couldn't make any major decisions without Winona's approval. Both Garrison and I would receive equal shares in a trust that would mature when we turned 35. The company would remain intact, Vernon's reputation would survive, but the power would shift completely. When? I asked. Thursday, Winona said. Family dinner. He'll never see it coming in his own house, at his own table. As we left Drummond's office, I took my mother's arm. Mom, how did you stay with him all these years, knowing what you knew? She patted my hand with surprising strength. Because I was raising you, my dear. And I needed you to see exactly who your father was, so you'd never accept that treatment from anyone else. Your strength, Thora, comes from surviving Vernon Blackwood without becoming him. That's worth more than any inheritance. Thursday arrived with unseasonable warmth for October, the kind of day that made everything feel slightly off balance. Vernon had called the family meeting for 4 o'clock, thinking it was about annual tax planning. He and Garrison walked in together from the golf course, still laughing about some deal they'd just closed with a developer from Chicago. Winona, we're going to need drinks for this, Vernon called out, not even looking at my mother as he loosened his tie. The good, Scotch. We just netted another $8 million on the Riverside expansion. Maxwell Drummond sat at the head of our dining room table, the same place Vernon usually commanded. His briefcase was open, papers arranged in neat stacks like a casino dealer preparing for a high-stakes game. Vernon stopped mid-stride when he saw him. What the hell is this? Vernon's voice shifted from jovial to threatening in an instant. Good afternoon, Mr. Blackwood, Drummond said calmly. Please, have a seat. Your wife has asked me to discuss some concerns about the company structure. Vernon laughed, but it was sharp, defensive. Winona doesn't know anything about the business. This is ridiculous. Sit down, Vernon, my mother said. She stood by the window, backlit by the afternoon sun, wearing a white suit that made her look like something between an angel and an avenging spirit. Garrison looked between our parents, confusion clear on his face. Mom, what's going on? I'm protecting this family, Winona said quietly, from itself. Drummond slid a folder across the table. Vernon didn't touch it, so Garrison grabbed it, his face paling as he read. These are serious allegations, he said slowly. Bribery, tax evasion, fraud. Mom, where did you get this? From your father's office, Winona replied. From his files. From conversations he had in this very room while he thought I was just pouring coffee and arranging flowers. Vernon's face had turned an alarming shade of red. You went through my private files? Our files, Vernon. We're married, remember? For 40 years, you've told me everything was ours. The house, the money, the business. Well, that includes the crimes. Drummond cleared his throat. Mr. Blackwood, your wife has enough evidence here to ensure federal prosecution. The Riverside bribes alone carry a 15-year sentence. Add the tax evasion and the environmental fraud, and you're looking at spending the rest of your life in federal prison. This is extortion, Vernon snarled. No, Drummond corrected. Extortion would be if Mrs. Blackwood wanted money to stay quiet. She doesn't want money. She wants control of the company she helped build by keeping your secrets and raising your children while you built your empire on criminal foundations. You sign these papers, Drummond continued, sliding another stack toward Vernon. And Mrs. Blackwood becomes majority owner. The company remains intact. Your reputation survives. You continue as CEO, but with oversight. Or we go to the federal prosecutor tomorrow morning with everything. Vernon turned to me, his eyes wild. You're behind this. You poisoned her against me. No, Dad, I said, my voice steady. You did that yourself. At your birthday party, in front of everyone, you made it clear that I was nothing to you, that Mom was nothing, just props in the Vernon Blackwood show. This is about that toast? Vernon's voice cracked with disbelief. You're destroying our family over a toast? No, my mother said, walking to the table. I'm saving our family from you. Every cruel word you said to Thora, every time you dismissed me in front of your friends, every lesson you taught Garrison about stepping on people to get ahead, it ends today. Garrison had been silent, reading through the evidence. Now he looked up. The trust restructuring means I share everything equally with Thora? Yes, Drummond confirmed. Both of you will inherit equally when you turn 35. That's not fair, Garrison protested. I've worked for this company for 9 years. She sells paintings. And yet, Winona said coolly, she never committed a federal crime to do it. Can you say the same? Page 12 of that folder, Garrison, the Harbor Point demolition. You signed off on it knowing the asbestos hadn't been properly removed. The room went silent. Garrison's mouth opened and closed, like a fish gasping for air. Vernon picked up the pen with a shaking hand. You're making a mistake, Winona. You don't know how to run a company? No, she agreed, but I know how to hire people who do, starting with promoting Margaret, your secretary, to vice president, the woman who's actually been running your office for 15 years while you played golf. Vernon signed every page, each signature looking more defeated than the last. When he finished, he stood up slowly, looking every one of his 62 years. I hope you're satisfied, he said to me. I'm not doing this for satisfaction, Dad, I replied. I'm doing it for survival. That was 6 months ago. The power shift in the Blackwood family happened so quietly that most of Vernon's business associates still don't know about it. On paper, he's still CEO of Blackwood Enterprises. In reality, every major decision goes through Winona, who turned out to have a sharper business mind than anyone expected. Her first move was hiring 3 female executives Vernon had previously passed over for promotions. Her second was promoting Margaret, Vernon's long-suffering secretary, to vice president of operations. Margaret had been basically running the company anyway while Vernon took 3-hour lunches and played golf with clients. Now she had the title and salary to match her responsibilities. Your mother's lost her mind, Vernon complained to me during one of our rare conversations. She's destroying everything I built. Check the quarterly reports, Dad, I replied. Profits are up 18%. He didn't have a response to that. Numbers were the only language Vernon truly respected, and the numbers were telling him a story he didn't want to hear. The company was thriving without his iron grip. His empire was actually growing stronger under Winona's collaborative leadership style. Garrison struggled the most with the new reality. For the first month, he tried to contest the arrangement, hiring his own lawyer to challenge the restructuring. When that failed, he attempted to turn the ICE or board against Winona, not realizing she'd already met with each member individually, showing them enough evidence to ensure their complete cooperation. This isn't fair, he told me after his third failed attempt to regain control. I earned my position. You just painted pictures and cried to Mom. I didn't cry to anyone, I said simply. I just stopped pretending Dad's cruelty was love. Last week, something unexpected happened. Garrison showed up at my gallery during our evening exhibition. He stood in the doorway for a full minute before walking in, his hands shoved deep in his pockets like a teenager forced to apologize. Maybe we could do something with the commercial properties, he said, not quite meeting my eyes. Art installations in the lobbies or something. Mom thinks it would add value. It wasn't an apology, but for Garrison, it was progress. We're now planning an artist residency program in 3 of Blackwood Enterprises buildings. He still doesn't understand my world, but he's finally acknowledging it exists. Vernon and I exist in a careful dance of avoidance. He shows up to family dinners but leaves early. He attended my gallery's summer gala, but stood in the back nursing a single scotch for 2 hours. When a critic from the Times approached him about my work, he said, "Thora has always had her own vision," which was the closest to a compliment I'd ever heard from him. Last Sunday, he pulled me aside after dinner. "Your mother says you're expanding the gallery to a second location." "That's right." "The space in Brooklyn we looked at," he nodded slowly. "It's a good property." "Undervalued. You could flip it for twice the price in 5 years." "I'm not planning to flip it, Dad. I'm planning to showcase art there." He stared at me for a long moment. "I know," he said finally, and walked away. My mother, Winona, has become someone entirely new, or maybe she's become who she always was underneath. At 59, she enrolled in law school, specializing in financial fraud cases. "I have experience," she jokes, the first real humor I'd heard from her in 20 years. She attends classes during the day and reviews company reports at night, building a future that belongs entirely to her. "I spent 40 years as Mrs. Vernon Blackwood," she told me last week over coffee. "Now I'm just Winona." It's terrifying and wonderful. She's even started dating a literature professor from Columbia who brings her flowers and quotes poetry. Vernon knows but hasn't said a word. What could he say? He lost the right to opinions about Winona's life the moment he signed those papers. As for me, I learned that sometimes the best response to cruelty isn't anger or tears or even walking away. Sometimes it's patience. Sometimes it's gathering strength in silence until you have enough power to change the game entirely. My father thought he was teaching me about weakness when he dismissed me at every opportunity. Instead, he taught me that real power doesn't announce itself with toasts and applause. Real power waits, it watches, it collects the evidence. And when the moment is right, it doesn't destroy, it restructures. The Blackwood Empire still stands, stronger than ever. But the kingdom has a new queen, and the princess is no longer waiting for approval. She's building her own empire, one painting at a time. If you enjoyed this story, please like this video and share it with someone who needs to hear that silence isn't weakness. Comment below with your own experiences of standing up to those who underestimated you. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more stories about finding strength in unexpected places and the power of patience over pride.